Very good morning, students. Welcome back to online classes. In today's session, we are going to start a new chapter for the revision. The new chapter is function overloading and member functions. In this chapter, we are going to have 5-mark questions. Now let us start our revision class 1. The same warning note for the students for all the revision classes. Note, this information is for the students, not to skip the videos for the betterment of the students to understand the revision concepts. First, the previous theory classes of a particular topic was being covered. Those videos will be played and followed by that revision concept on the same topic will be carried out. Now, we'll see that what are the topics we are going to cover into today's session. The topics to be covered in the revision class are needs for a function overloading, concept of polymorphism, applications of function overloading through simple example, restrictions on overloading functions, and also last topic, that is calling overloading functions. These are the topics which we are going to discuss in today's revision class. Let us see in detail. Very good morning, students. Welcome to today's session. In this today's session, we are going to start a new chapter called as function overloading. Before seeing what are the topics in this chapter, we'll see what is the weightage of this chapter. We have 5 marks onto this chapter, which carries one question from the 5 marks. Which carries one question from the 5 marks, which has a weightage of 5 marks. Before starting this chapter, we'll see that what are the topics we are going to cover in this chapter. First, we are going to see the introduction part, need for function overloading, defining and declaration of overloading function, restrictions on overloading function, calling overloading functions, other functions in a class, and we have another 2 importance functions like inline functions and friend functions in this chapter. Now we will discuss one by one what are the different topics in this chapter. Welcome to the function overloading chapter. Function overloading in C++ is one of those programming language that is very flexible, and it also covers several features of object-oriented programming. In C++ overloading, we can create two or more members of a class having the same name but difference in number or type of parameters. It is known as C++ overloading. In C++, we can overload like methods, constructors, and index properties. I'll repeat it again. In C++, we can overload like methods, constructors, and index properties. In function overloading in C++, we can define as the process of having 2 or more member function of a class. We can define as the process of having 2 or more member function of a class with the same name, but difference in parameter. In function overloading, the function can redefined either by using different types of arguments or different number of arguments according to the requirement it according to the requirement. It is only through these different compilers can differentiate between the two overloading functions. We can achieve polymorphism through function overloading. We can achieve polymorphism through function overloading. If we use same name for different functions, compiler will automatically decide about the appropriate function by comparing the argument types and number of arguments. Once again, I'll repeat you the function overloading. The function overloading means two or more functions having a same name but different in number or types of arguments. By using function overloading, we can achieve polymorphism through function overloading. If we use same name for a different function, compiler will automatically decides about the appropriate function by how it is going to choose a function, in the sense by comparing the argument types or number of argument which is being passed in a functions. This is how it is we are going to achieve the function overloading. We'll see that how the function overloading it is being processed by seeing the syntax into the next slide. Yes, coming to the syntax. Once you observe the syntax of function overloading, here we have starting with a return type, return type followed by a function name, with an argument list, In this syntax, I have created two functions, same as like a return type followed by the function name with the argument list. Here we have list number 1 and list number 2, and a body is being, the function body is being opened by a open brace, and we are going to close by the close brace. Here we are going to see that what is this return type, where the function is going to return the value in which manner. For an example, it is an integer int. Maybe it never returns any value like a void. It may be a real integers like a float. It can have any type of a return type followed by the function name. First of all, when you want to achieve the function overloading, the function name, but whatever the function name it is being created, should be a same name for the other function name. For an example, I'm going to create a function name called as an x. The same return type and the function name should consist of an x. Followed by a different argument. Example, I have passed one argument list, and also I have been passed argument list 2. If suppose an argument is int a, the int a should not be same as into a second argument list as int a. It may differ in the number or type of an arguments. This is how you are going to create a syntax of a function overloading. Once we go for an example, for this example for function overloading, we can clearly understand how we are going to create the function overloading in this chapter. Coming to this example, we have a small example. This program is for sum of two numbers and sum of three numbers. Clearly understand the concept? Sum of two numbers whereas sum of three numbers. Once I create my main program, I'm going to create an object called as an X. X is my object. And I had been created a class called as a max. Max is my class name and X is my object. See out the sum of two numbers. I'm going to access my sum function by using an object called x.sum. Once x.sum has been accessed, the sum function has a two arguments, that is 10 and 20. Once object is accessed by X, it's known as the object belongs to max. Object belongs to max class. It just goes to the class called as in max and finds out whether I have the sum function. Yes, I have a sum function under the class max. And I have been passed the two variables. Before getting into that, I have a sum, name of a function, sum, which has a two function name called as sum as well as your sum. A compiler checks the function sum has been present. Yes, sum has been present, and it checks that now how many number of arguments is being present. It checks that it has been two arguments telling that 10 and 20. 10 belongs to an integer and 20 belongs to an integer. Once a value has been passed, 10 and 20, the first value passes to the int a, and second value 20 passes to the int b. Once a value is passed, it returns a plus b. That is a plus b, it returns a value as 30, and the sum of two numbers 30 is being present. The second one, I have see out the sum of three numbers. The X is an object which has the same name of a function, where we come across the function overloading. Once the function has been called, it checks that I have been passing a three values 10, 20 as well as 30. 10, 20 as well as 30. Again it goes to the class max and finds out whether we have a sum. Yes, I have a sum, and it checks that the first function sum. Yes, sum, and it is again checks the type of arguments, and also it checks the number of arguments. The first function has two arguments, and now we access three arguments, so it goes to the second function called as a sum. And it checks that a number of arguments. Yes, I have a number of argument int a, int b, as well as int c. Here I have three arguments with a function passing three values 10, 20, 30. Now the 10 which is being passed to the a, and 20 passed to the b, and 30 passed to the c. The three values pass to the three arguments and returns a plus b plus c. And the value which has been accessed onto the sum of the numbers is the sum of three numbers is, it calculates 10, 20 and 30 is being returned here. Here we needed to see that how the function overloading is being passed. Once I create a class name called as max, and I have the function name called as sum, and one more function called as a sum. This we called as function overloading with number of arguments, with different number of arguments, or different types of data types. Different types of data types. We call this as a function overloading. This small programs helps you to understand what is a function overloading. And next we'll see that what are the advantage of this function overloading. What are the advantages of this function overloading? Now we will let us see the major advantages of function overloading. We use function overloading to save the memory space, consistency, and reliability of our program. Again, we use function overloading to save the memory space, consistency, and reliability of a program. With the use of function overloading concept, we can develop more than one function with the same name. Function overloading shows the behavior of polymorphism that allows us to get different behaviors. Although they will be some link use the same name of the function. Function overloading speeds up the execution of the program. Function overloading speeds up the execution of the program. Function overloading is used to code reusability. Function overloading is used to code reusability and also to save the memory. It helps applications to load the class methods based on types of parameters. It loads the applications class methods based on types of applications. Code maintenance is very easy. Now we'll just see the key points of the advantages. The code is executes faster, easy to understand, the flow of information, easier interface between program and real world objects, and also easy to debug a program, and also easy to maintain the codes. Once again we'll come across the code is very faster for execution, easier to understand, the flow of information, easier interface between program and real world objects, and also easy to debug the program and easy for maintenance. These are the major advantages of using of function overloading as well as needs for function overloading. In the next slide, we'll see that what are the major disadvantages of function overloading. Disadvantages of function overloading. Function declaration that differs only by its return type cannot be overloaded with the function overloading process. I'll repeat it again. Function declaration that differs only by a return type, only by a return type cannot be overloaded with function overloading process. Member functions declaration with the same parameter or the same name. Member function declaration with the same parameter or a same name type cannot be overloaded if any one of them is declared as static member function. Will come again. Member function declaration with the same parameter or the same name, the types cannot be overloaded if any one of them is declared as static member function. Each overloaded function must have different argument list. Each overload function must have different argument list. If type def is used for naming a function, then the function is not considered as a different type. This is one of a major disadvantage. If you use any type def is used for naming a function, then function is not considered as different type. These are the different advantages of function overloading. And we'll see the next topic into a next session. Before getting into the next session, we'll see what are the assignments should be done for this class. Before getting into today's assignment, we'll just have a revise. What are the topics we have covered in this session? Firstly, we have seen what is function overloading. And we have also seen with the syntax with a simple example, and also we have covered the advantage and disadvantage of the function overloading. Today's assignment is what is function overloading? Give a syntax with an example. A next question, what are the advantage and disadvantage of function overloading? This is an assignment should be covered for the next session. Thank you, students. We'll see you into next session. Thank you.
Good morning, students. Welcome back to online classes. So today's session will see revision on function overloading. So last class we were discussing about like data structure, classes and objects, and I have already given you the assignment question as well as the assignment test. So if you go through, it will be useful for your second round test. So you just go through what are the questions, important questions, chapter wise, concept wise we have discussed. So similarly, we will just discuss about function overloading too. So function overloading, as sir has discussed in your regular class, what is meant by function overloading, what is the definition, application, need for function overloading, and what is you might have discussed about inline function as well as friend function. Okay. So when I talk about the weightage for your PU board, for the exam point of view, we'll have only one 5-mark question. I repeat, according to your blueprint, you have only one 5-mark question which will appear from this function overloading chapter. So the concept of function overloading is very similar, and it's very easy and very simple. So what is function overloading? Two or more functions having the same name but different in arguments as well as the type of arguments. So what made us to to make use of function overloading in the sense, when we have a problem, we have n number of functions. So in order to solve the problem, we call n number of functions. So each function will have its own operations. Instead of calling different functions with different function name, we might not have remembered all the function names which we implement in the program. So what we have to do, just implement the program name, implement a function which has the same name. So the function name, for example, I want to just find the area of a circle, area of a rectangle, area of a triangle. So area is the function name. So what are the type of arguments which takes? The type of arguments and the number of arguments can vary. So I repeat, the operations which are performed by the functions are different, but the function name is same, and it takes different arguments as well as the type of arguments. So we make the change, we show the difference only in the type of arguments as well as the number of arguments. So the function name remains the same. So what we are overloading? We are overloading the arguments. We are overloading, for example, if I told you the function name is area. Area is the same function name, but the operation which it performs, it depends on the type of arguments and the number of arguments which we pass. To calculate the area of a rectangle, the formula is different. To calculate the area of a triangle, the formula is different. To calculate the area, anything you take, rectangle, let it be square, rectangle, triangle, or let it be a sphere. To calculate the area, it is different. So here you might have discussed about the sum and product example which sir has discussed in your regular classes. So here product remains the same, but the arguments which we pass, it might take 2 arguments PQ, next it has taken 3 arguments PQR. Even for sum, you might have taken integer value to add, and even if the same sum, you might have taken floating point value to add. So these are the different types of examples which you have discussed. Now let me start from the beginning. So what are the concepts we are going to discuss in today's class? What is function overloading? The definition, need for function overloading, restrictions on function overloading. Then I will discuss an example. This is 5-mark question. 2 years or back, couple of years back to, they've asked this question in your midterm exam. Okay, in the function overloading concept, the expected question are one question on inline function, friend function. Otherwise, they may ask the program. The program is the program. They may ask you the program to calculate the volume of cone, cube, and cylinder. So let me discuss this program. Before discussing this program, let me tell you the definition for function overloading. So what do you mean by function overloading? Function overloading. So the definition for function overloading is two or more functions. So two or more functions have the same name but different in the number of arguments and the type of arguments. Okay, I repeat, two or more functions having the same name but they differ in the number of arguments as well as the data type of the arguments. Therefore, the function name is overloaded. We have the same function name but we overload the function name with different arguments. So only they tell it as, since we are overloading the function name, we call it as function overloading. What is the need for function overloading? As I said, when we have different types of functions which performs different operations, instead of giving different function name, we give the same function name but we overload the function name with the different type of arguments. That is the first need. Next is, it is easier to understand the flow of information and debug. Code maintenance is very easy. Then easier interface between program and the real world object. I repeat, code maintenance is easy. It's easier to understand the information flow and the debug, and it provides an easy interface between the programs and the real world objects. These are the need for function overloading. There are four needs. I repeat, first need is, when the different functions are created for different operations, the user has to call respective functions depending on the situation. So instead of using different situation, if the same function is called with different arguments using function overloading, then the compiler automatically decides about the appropriate function by comparing the argument type used in the call to the function and calls the required functions. Thus the code execution is faster. So what we are calling, if we use the same function name, it remains the same. The memory or the space which occupies is also very less, but we can pass different type of arguments. Okay, we can pass different type of arguments and we can change the data type too. As I said, for sum you can add two integer. Same sum function can add two floating point value too. So this makes the code execution faster. Code maintenance is easy. It is easy to maintain the information flow as well as to debug, and it also provides an interface between the program and the real world object. Okay, these are the 4 points which we have to remember. Next, sir has discussed you about the examples for function overloading. So let me not discuss that. I'll try straight away. I'll tell you the program how to implement the function overloading by computing the volume of a cone, cube, and cylinder. Okay students, now we will discuss, before discussing the program, I will tell you the two main restrictions on function overloading. So in what are the situations this will not work? In a sense, we have this restriction, that is each time when we call the functions, the function in a set of overloaded functions must have different argument list. So every time the function, as we know, we are overloading the function name. How we are going to overload the function name? With the argument, the type of arguments and the number of arguments which we use in the function name will be overloaded. So each function in a set of overloaded functions should have a different argument list. So this becomes a restriction. It should have every time, it should have differently, because if you don't give the different argument list, for example, I have int sum. So imagine I am taking two arguments, both are of integer type. Next I have float sum. So I have float. Again I want to add floating point. If I want to add floating point, already I have two. So again, if I gave, it should have, the number of arguments should vary. So I am going to sum up three floating point. Again, if I want to sum up three integer value, the number of arguments for sum in integer should be different. So that is the only distinction between the function overloading, because every time when we call the function name remains the same. What differs is the number of arguments and the type of arguments. Here the type is integer. Okay, here the type is also integer, name, some function name is also same, return type is also same. But what differs between this first sum and the last sum is the type of integer is also same. The number of arguments differs. So here we have only 2 arguments. In this case we have 3 arguments. Okay, here 2, in float 2, see the return type is same, the function name is same, the argument is also same. What differs is the number of arguments which we have in these 2 functions is different. Hence function overloading is possible. So this is the meaning for this. This becomes a overhead. Okay, this becomes overhead in the function overloading. Every time when you call, it should have a different argument. That is the restriction. Next, we are aware of use type def. Okay, when we do programming, we use type def is used for naming functions. Then the function is not considered as different type. When we use type def, every time when I call the function, it will not consider it as a different type. When it considers a different data type only, function overloading is possible. But once we use type def, it will not take it as a different type. That means this sum is also same, this sum is also same. It will not take the different data type. That time what will happen? Function overloading fails. Okay, so this is the next restriction. When we give type def for the naming of a function overloading will not take place. Why? Because it will not consider it as a different type. Okay, so these are the 2 main restrictions on function overloading. This you should keep in your mind. Next we'll discuss about the program. This is 5 marks question. They may ask you to write a program to calculate the volume of cone, cube and cylinder using function overloading. Okay students, now we will discuss the program. So I have given you the program. Okay, what does the program says? We need to calculate the volume of a cone, cube and cylinder. I repeat, we need to calculate the volume of a cone, cube and cylinder by using the concept of function overloading. So function overloading, we have a number of examples. If you learn this example, it will be useful for your lab program, as well as if the same program is asked in an exam, it will be helpful for you. Otherwise, when they ask you to explain what is function overloading, explain with an example. You can write the definition for function overloading and give this example. Okay. So I have written the complete program here with the header files. So you need to include iostream.h, conio.h. I have a class. My class name is fun overload. Here my class name is fun overload. I have defined the class. My class ends here. All the operations, all your data member functions I have included within your class. The definition for member function is within the class. So in the classes and object we discussed, when I define the member function inside the class, what it is called as inside. We are defining the member function inside the class. So no need to use the scope resolution operator. When we want to define it outside the class, we need to use the scope resolution operator. So all the definition I have included within the class. Now you see your program execution begins from your main function. Your class ends here. Your program execution begins from the main function. We have clear screen, and from fun overload is a class name. By using a class name, I created an object. This is an object. My object is f1. By using this f1 object, I can access all your member functions called volume and volume. So what is same here? Your function name is same. Volume. What is different? The arguments which is present in your function differ. So here I have the data type of my argument A is integer. How many arguments I have? I have only 1 argument. Here I have 2 arguments. What is the data type? Double. So I have 2 arguments. Now, 2 things you have to keep in your mind. How to implement this? You need to know the formula. First of all, you should know what are the member functions. So here they asked 3 things, okay, to calculate the volume of cone, cube and cylinder. So you need to define the 3 member function. For defining the member function, you should be knowing the formula. So how to calculate the volume of a cube? Volume of a cube is a cube, okay. Side cube. So I have a cube. So a cube, how to implement the a cube, okay. So how to write it in program terms? A into a, okay. So a into a, how many arguments I am passing? Only 1. So here you see volume of the cube. So in your output, what it will appear? How it will appear? Volume of the cube. So f1 dot volume, I am passing only 1 argument, that is 10. So which volume will be called? This one or this one? Which volume will be called? The first one will be called, because of I am passing only 1 argument, that is 10. So 10 into 10 is 100. 100 into 10 is 1000. What is the volume of a cube? Is 1000. I repeat, 10 into 10 into 10 is 1000. So my answer is 1000. Next one, volume of the cone. Volume of the cone. So which member function will be called? Which member function will be called? Based on the number of arguments 2.0 and 3.0. So this member function is called, this is to calculate the volume of the cone. I have R and H. What is the formula to calculate the volume of the cube? 1 by 3 in pi r square h. 1 by 3 pi r square h. So 1 by 3 I am taking it as 0.33 into pi value is 22 divided by 7, we get 3.142. So I am taking 3.14 into r into h. Okay, r is your radius, h is your height. So 1 by 3 pi r square h is the formula to calculate the volume of a cone. How to implement this? This 1 by 3 I have taken it as 0.33. So what are the two arguments which I pass? This r and h. Okay. So based on the arguments which we pass, this volume is called, we calculate the volume. So the answer is 12.4344. 12.4344. If you calculate, if you multiply the r value, okay, r value what I passed 2, h value is 3. So when you substitute 0.33 into 3.14 into 2 into 2 into 3, when you multiply you get 12.4344. Okay, last one, volume of the cylinder. How to calculate the volume of the cylinder? So the volume of the cylinder, see how many arguments I am passing, 5, 6 and 7. So here we have the definition for volume of the cylinder. So I am taking, okay, one second. So see here how to calculate the volume of a cylinder. Volume of a cylinder, how many arguments I have? I have 2 arguments. Here too I have 2 arguments. Why it didn't take this means here it is double, here also it is double. But what type of values I am passing here? I am first passing the double value. In the next argument I am passing integer. So which one will be called? This function will be called. Why? Because first value is double 2.0, next I pass 3. So integer value. Based on the type of arguments, again the function name will be called. So this volume will be taken. So how many arguments I am passing? Only 2 arguments. Okay, if I pass 3 arguments, that will be for your to calculate the volume of a cuboid. What is the formula to calculate the volume of a cuboid? Length into breadth into height, L into B into H. Okay, for that only before I pass 3 values. If you pass 3 values, you need to define the volume of a cuboid. But here I have not taken. I have taken example only of 3. One is to calculate the volume of cone, tube and cylinder. Now last but not least, now we are going to calculate the volume of the cylinder. How to calculate the volume of the cylinder? The formula is pi r square h. So what is your pi value? 3.14 into r square. What is my r value? R value is 2, that is the double value. That data type of r is double. Okay, next we have height. Height is h. H is nothing but integer value. So integer I have given it as 3. When you multiply 3.14 into 2.0 into 2.0 into 3, what is the value you are going to get? The volume of the cylinder is 37.68. Okay, 37.68. Now this is the example for function overloading. I repeat what we have done. We have calculated the volume of 3 functions. Okay, volume of 3 solid shapes. We have cone, cube and cylinder. Cone, the formula is different, cube is different, cylinder is different. So based on the type of arguments, see for volume of a cube I have only 1 argument. Volume of a cone I have 2 arguments. The data type is same. Volume of a cylinder also I have 2 arguments, but the data type is different, R and H. So while calling the function also, when we pass the same type of arguments, for example here I have 2 and 3. Again, even for this one, if I pass volume of a cylinder 2, if I pass 2 and 3, so there will be a function overloading becomes overhead, where the compiler will not understand which volume to call. So we should be very specific. While passing the volume of a cylinder, we should be specific. The first value should be double, next value should be integer. So we need to concentrate only on the number of arguments as well as the type of arguments in the function overloading. So this is the concept of function overloading. In the next class we discuss about inline function, its advantage, disadvantage as well as friend function. Thank you.